boy Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates. All I ask is that you think.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates, and welcome to the Just My 3 Cents podcast, a live, quick, rapid fire, interactive podcast on race, sex, and culture. A lot of stuff going on in the news this week. And just keep in mind, when I say live interactive, you can click the link. I just posted it on YouTube, posted it on the Facebook page. You can click the link and jump on this thing live with me. Again, there's so many things are going on in the news this week around race, sex, and culture, if you will. Whether it's the Whoopi Goldberg situation, Nick Cannon, we're going to be talking about that on Saturday's Mental Dialogue Talk Show, which is our in-depth 2-hour show we do every Saturday morning. Been rocking for 6 years now. It's 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Blog Talk Radio. But this here is just a quick hit, middle of the week, where hopefully some of you will jump on and give us your 3 cents on the topic of discussion, which is tonight. Wanted to discuss Brian Flores, former head coach for the Miami Dolphins, who's now suing the NFL for racism and basically bringing a class action suit where, in a sense, other coaches, if we will, can get in on it and talk about, in a sense, their dilemma with getting and maintaining jobs and having fair opportunity within the NFL to, in a sense, get head coaching jobs. If you're not familiar with Brian Flores, again, he was the former Dolphin coach, Miami Dolphin head coach, who basically had 2 back-to-back winning years. And the Miami Dolphins, I'm a Miami Dolphin fan, so this might be part of the reason why I wanted to talk about this, if you will. And I was devastated when they decided to let him go after the season we had just had. We had a season previously where made the playoffs and had expectations for this year. Started out slow, but he righted the ship and ended up having a back-to-back winning season, something that the Dolphins haven't done in so many years. It's laughable. And so I was definitely surprised to see that brother let go. And then when he was let go, it was pretty much understood because of how, in a sense, he had done such a good job, like, right? You know, how do you get let go after doing a good job, right? So he had done such a good job, while it was surprising that Steve Ross, the owners of the Dolphins, decided to let him go. And they kind of blamed it on a difference between himself and Tua. If you know anything about the Dolphins, the quarterback that was selected first round a few years ago out of Alabama. So there was a difference between him and Tua. And so they kind of blamed it on that. But it ultimately, while it was surprised to see that Brian Flores had been let go, it was understood around the NFL that more likely he would find a job real soon. Again, just doing a phenomenal job to a degree, somewhat turning the Miami Dolphin franchise around after a lot of bad years. So I wanted to give a little context, but I really want to get into the dialogue. I see a couple of you watching, so just keep in mind you can jump on at any time and join this broadcast. But I just wanted to give some perspective. If you've been following the Just My 3 Cents podcast, we definitely go in depth on these issues of race, sex, and culture. And so, with that in mind, I wanted to give my perspective on the fact that he's bringing this lawsuit. So I want to give some context from this perspective. I don't simply want to be looked at as that I'm judging Brian Flores and his personal decision based on what he wants to do. I want to move it to a larger context of when we see these situations, which basically a class action lawsuit being brought forward, where to a degree it's an African American, to a degree, if you will, fighting to get in white spaces. And so that's kind of the larger context that I want to have here, and really help people understand that even me giving my 3 cents is not an opinion about Brian Flores, who, again, I was personally devastated that they let that brother go. In shock, because I was a big fan of him being the coach of my team and liking what he had done and the results that we had gotten the last couple of years. So again, please understand that these perspectives are not about what Brian Flores should do. And let me even give and to his credit, as I just mentioned, it's a class action lawsuit. And he opened up when he mentioned that he was taking, that when he mentioned that he was going to do this, this was bigger than him. This was bigger than him. And there's a lot of things that are alleged inside of the lawsuit, to include, just to give this context, which I think, here, let me say this, because again, I want to make sure people understand that while I'm going to have a broader context about overall as far as African Americans fighting to get in black spaces, I do want to absolutely get this understood. Again, this is not about Brian Flores himself, from the standpoint that, from what I understand, based on some things that are in the lawsuit, that the owner, Stephen Ross, even offered him to tank and pretty much questioned the integrity of the sport, and basically said he would pay him extra money in order to tank. And so if that ends up proving to be true, then not only will it be a bad look for Stephen Ross, but this lawsuit could really actually, if that's true, could open up an opportunity for ownership, not just getting black coaches, but actual ownership. So that's the big picture, for what I understand, that in a sense Brian Flores is looking at. Because I'll tell you personally, again, now let's get into the context that I wanted to get into. So I'll tell you personally, from just the individual standpoint, it was understood that more than likely he would find another job very quickly, even though, had he been a white coach, the reality is more than likely he wouldn't have gotten let go after 2 back-to-back winning seasons, especially at a franchise who did not have a long history of winning as of recently, right? The Miami Dolphins are a storied franchise to a degree, having the only undefeated season in the history of the NFL back in 1972, I think. And obviously they were relevant all of during the Marino years, but pretty much since Marino, it's been up and down for those of us who are Dolphin fans, right? And so again, another coach that's not black would probably still be coaching right now, right? And so, subconsciously and in the back of our minds, we're like, wow, this would. And when I got told, I was like, yeah, that wouldn't have happened to a white coach. And so, again, did not like it, because I liked him as a coach, but he would get hired again. So from an individual standpoint, right? From an individual standpoint, if he wanted to make it about himself, he could just wait until, in a sense, the next job just comes available, because more likely he would be a candidate to a candidate that more likely was going to find himself probably working for a better organization than even the Miami Dolphins, right? And so from an individual standpoint, if that was his focus, I would applaud him. And that's what I thought would happen. So I was shocked and surprised that he was bringing this lawsuit. And so here's the bigger dialogue. And again, I hope some of you that are watching, hit the link and jump on and give me your 3 cents. But the bigger dialogue is, anytime that I see, in a sense, these class action lawsuits about, in a sense, racism on this level and fighting to get in white spaces, I have this thought that, to a degree, our ancestors have laid the type of groundwork to where there's, in a sense, enough opportunity out here. You don't have to agree with this, but there's enough opportunity out here that, for the most part, I actually don't. I like to see us no longer fight to get in white spaces. And then there's the extreme of it. The extreme of it is, as they always say, build your own table, create your own space. I'll be honest, I don't know, in a sense, when it comes to something like the NFL, I don't know how realistic that is, to a degree. And I would say the answer is somewhere in the middle. And so, just from a perspective standpoint, I think our ancestors have laid the type of groundwork that allows us to no longer fight to get into white spaces. And that's ultimately what's happening here. And again, I applaud it, because the man said, this is bigger than me. So versus him just lining up, and the NFL coaches get paid well, and they get paid well when they get let go. And his next job, so he would just be just fine if he just signed up to be a head coach. So much respect to him, Brian Flores, as the individual taking on this for within his industry. for within his industries. He's fighting for a bigger picture. Much respect for that. But again, the perspective that I wanted to bring to it is just, again, as always, we just want to have you think about things. Is it a situation where now that in 2021, that to a degree, we have to, in a sense, fight to get in white spaces, or do we want to be seen in that manner? Because there are different approaches to doing so. He could have had a great effect by getting another job, doing well in that job, right, and paving the way from that standpoint. But he wanted to make it bigger than that. Again, I applaud that brother for that. You know what I mean? And so, that's the perspective. But the question is, so something like the question a lot of times gets thrown into the extremes. Should we fight to get in white spaces, or should we build our own? And the reality is usually it ain't that simple. But we'll have the dialogue in the extremes, like, oh man, yeah, it ain't right what they're doing. And so hopefully he wins the lawsuit. Or the flip side is, why don't we build our own league? And we'll say that haphazardly, in my opinion, and the answer is always somewhere in the middle. And the biggest thing is that, in my opinion, that we move away from judging whatever path the individual chooses to take. So while I personally, again, am not a fan of fighting to get in white spaces, I'm not taking the time to suggest what Brian Flores should do. And I actually applaud what he's doing, because he's decided within the industry where he has some level of leverage, if you will, based on the situation he's in, right? That basically he can make this move. Salute to that brother. Much respect to that brother. You know what I mean? But the bigger context for us as a culture, because our goal on this show is, if you will, is to raise the culture. And to a degree, I would like to see, again, this is not a shot at Brian Flores, it's just something to think about. I would like to see that we start as best as we can raising our Black children not to be as concerned with fighting to get in white spaces. And that kind of gets into that dialogue historically where we talk about whether integration was good or bad. And again, I think we have these dialogues in the extreme, and the answer is somewhere in the middle. And so again, it's just me posing the thought process of, is it a good thing in a sense to fight to get into these white spaces? And then let's talk about the NFL. We've had obviously what happened with the Colin Kaepernick situation over the years. And then I want to get a sense, show how sometimes even the push for this, is almost turned into a parody. So let me highlight, if you will, the Rooney Rule. For those who may not know it, the Rooney Rule got put in place in the early 2000s, if I recall, which is it required NFL franchises, if they were looking for head coaches, to ensure that they were hiring, or not, at least interviewing Black candidates. And that was something that was basically a rule that was put in place by the Rooneys, which is the owners of the Pittsburgh Steelers, if you're not familiar with the NFL. And so, they're the one. Mike Tomlin has been a long time Black coach, has been a long time coach. Again, just for those who may not have context, it's been a long time. And so that owner was pretty much behind the Rooney Rule getting put in place. And so maybe at the time it was always weird how it was looked at, right? It was weird in the sense that it's like, okay, you're requiring these owners to at least look at some African-American coaches. And over the years, there were even some Black coaches who said, I don't want to be a token interview. And especially in the situations in which you pretty much know who you want. And so while it's to a degree, it's like, while I appreciate the rule, if I'm just there just to check a box and you already have somebody in mind, don't play me like this. And this is exactly what Brian Flores is alleging happened to him when he interviewed for the New York Giants job. And I don't want to be necessarily have to give you all the news or whatever, but just in case you haven't seen this or whatever. And so Bill Belichick's name has, believe it or not, has been dragged into this from the standpoint that Brian Flores was able to figure out when he applied for the New York Giants job that the Giants, the guy they ended up getting, they already had him in mind. And Brian Flores is saying that when he went for the Giants job and when he went for the Broncos job, he in his lawsuit, he's explaining how they were just bringing him in simply for the Rooney Rule without no real opportunity for him to be hired. And the reason Belichick got involved was because Bill Belichick had Brian Flores had worked under Bill Belichick at one point, and the other guy they were hiring was his name was Brian something. Brian, I'm sorry, but he was Brian. They worked for Belichick, and Belichick mistakenly congratulated the other Brian, but it went to Brian Flores, and he basically was able to put together that they had already planned to hire the other guy. And when Belichick, and to give some more context, when Belichick sent him the text congratulating the other Brian, thinking that was he texted the wrong Brian, but he congratulated him. Brian Flores hadn't got interviewed yet, so that's how Brian Flores was able to put two and two together. Like, hold on, how you congratulating me? Because when he, you can go look this up on the internet. So that's how he knows they just played him. And so now he's bringing a class action lawsuit saying they have a long history of this, right? But what's the reality? The reality of fighting. This is what I'm talking about now can apply outside of the NFL from the standpoint that often as African Americans, to a degree, we in a sense can experience things like that or whatever. And quite often, something that happens is when you go for the top position, a lot of times, a lot of things get overlooked within file and rank. So a perfect example of in a sense, when somebody gets a position at the top, then a lot of times it makes people stop looking at any type of systemic stuff along the way. So right now, there's one African American head coach since the Rooney, currently in the league right now. And you may, if you know anything about sports, Eric Bieniemy has been a long time waiting to get a job, and everybody says he should have a job. He hasn't gotten that opportunity. So sometimes it can be upsetting, generally speaking, for African Americans to see that these people are not getting these opportunities. I'm of the belief that I don't want to fight to get in their space to the degree that it bothers me for other people's individuals and requests. I got my girl Deasia trying to jump on this thing with me. How you doing, Queen? What you got for me? Thanks for jumping in.
Hey, Montoya.
How you doing, Queen? What you got for me?
I am well. It's just the interesting point that you was making about, like how they already have someone in mind, and we have this affirmative action and all this type of stuff or whatever. I actually had a relative to experience something like this where the company, I guess, for the push for diversity or something like that. It happens even though they're talking about millions and everything. This happened, with just your
Everyday regular.
middle class, your
Yeah,
your middle
everyday
class
regular.
everyday
Mm-hmm.
worker, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Because I actually had a relative that worked alongside of some people that uh, came off as being friends, and actually this particular relative went in thinking they got the job because they have worked closely alongside of some of the people who got promoted, and now they are in a position to actually hire the relative on for a bigger role.
Mm-hmm.
And actually who had to make the decision had a friend that they are like a childhood friend, like not just a friend that the friendship developed from work. It was just like they've been knowing this person for years that
Mm-hmm.
happened to be of the same race and everything. So they took this relative to through all the processes of interviewing, knowing good and well that they weren't going to hire, but it's just the fact that they're able to say, okay, we did interview a black person at least. So they've passed what they needed to do as
They
far
check the
as
box.
affirmative action is
They
concerned.
check the
But
box.
they had no actual
Intentions.
intention to hire this person. And check this out. This person, and what they try to use to justify it is this person had a degree. if it was a good degree that was the qualifier, then you shouldn't even let
Even
people who
interview
don't
the other
have
person.
degree, you shouldn't
Shouldn't
even be
even
calling them for the interview. But this
absolutely.
person here, the relative, been with the company for ever since I was a teenager. The
Wow.
relative has been in that company since I was a teenager. This particular person has no actual experience in this field. They just have a degree for something that is totally unrelated. And how about now they have the relative training the friend who don't have the experience and got the job.
Yep. You get very disrespected in these spaces. So here's the bigger dialogue, and I thank you for coming on because it's helped me kind of leapfrog into the bigger dialogue. The bigger dialogue is I just think it's smart for us to be aware of what, like, how games will be played and the mockery of fighting to get into white spaces. I'm not even necessarily telling people whether we should be or should not be fighting, but but I think it's smart for us to be completely aware of how such mockeries can happen. And you understand what I'm saying? Like you do
Mhm.
need to be aware, because if you're not aware and you get blindsided by, oh, this wasn't fair, right? Then that's to me that's a dialogue that I think we have to be much smarter about. Such as, like, here's something that just happened this last couple of weeks. The President Biden highlights that he's gonna get a black woman for the Supreme Court position. Like, it's a mockery for him to announce that, because now in the event that some black woman who absolutely could be the best candidate, could be the most qualified, now she's going to be hit with the stigma of, you only got it because the president said it had to be a black woman. And so right now it's being ridiculed within the country, right? From the standpoint of, how fair is that? You know, how fair is it that you can already decide prior to looking at anybody?
Yeah, because it's not fair regardless of which race it is.
And so the mockery is, while Biden, to a degree, is playing our community by playing that up, it becomes stupid and foolish, because had he just selected a black woman without any type of pre-announcement, whatever political favor he was looking to gain in our community, it would have happened naturally. Now that looks stupid as hell by the way he's going about it. Does that make sense? Like, you
Right.
get, like, by fighting to get into a white space, quite often they make a mockery of it, and we end up, to a degree, looking foolish quite often. And that's why I'm
Yeah.
not a fan of trying to fight to get in spaces. I'm not saying don't go for positions or anything like that, but it's just sometimes being unaware allows, in a sense, a mockery to be made of our community, if you will.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I'm real big on, if they don't want you there, don't try to fight to be there. I think that we have gotten ourselves in a position where we don't need to necessarily do that anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And that's what I said.
And
I said earlier on the show, that's a credit to our ancestors. So to a
yeah,
degree, I always believe we have to be able to have enough perspective to understand what our ancestors actually have done. See, they've got us to the place where we kind of have the freedom to do what we're saying today. And it's like, because, in my opinion, we don't have a connection to really understanding what was done, even with the idea of us integrating it for people who have good ideas and bad ideas about it. To me, I don't think we appreciate what was done. So you and I have the freedom to talk like this today and say, why fight to be in their space? I wouldn't have put that on our ancestors. Our ancestors already had that fight. Go ahead, Queen.
yeah, and you know what? Something else, people got to understand this too, and a lot of people probably won't like this, but you got to think of it just from a human level. It's all about self-preservation and everything. So the thing is, 9 times out of 10, if you can give an opportunity to someone, you're gonna want to give that opportunity to someone who looks like you. You know what I'm saying? So the fact that these people, like in my family, my relative situation, the fact that this person hired their friend, yeah, it was wrong, but if I was in that position, I would try to find some type of loophole to get my friend in versus somebody that I'm not emotionally attached to. So you have to take that into consideration as well. Like, we're looking at, the only difference is we have like this systematic racism that stops us from being able to have certain opportunities or whatever, and that's only because we're pushing to be in their space when we have other avenues now that we don't have to do that. Because you're gonna, right now, if a black person or a white person and they came to you and they were like, you know what, I've been doing marketing and everything, I would like to be a part of your podcast, can I, be a part of your podcast, you're 9 times out of 10 is going to choose that black person over that white person. It's just part of just a human nature to me, to some extent. You know what I'm saying? So
Absolutely.
we have to take that into consideration as
Yeah,
well.
nepotism is a real life natural thing, and and like I got my man Omar D. I'm gonna read his comments because check out what this brother says, and I respect what he's saying. He says, in my agency, they have some black people at the top. I've been told I should be promoted high up the ladder. However, I get passed over, but I expect that. He said, I don't play politics, don't buck dance, and speak my mind, so I'm not surprised I am passed over. So I completely respect that perspective coming from this brother's comments, and that's pretty much what I'm asking, just for people to really understand. So what I'm hearing this brother say, for those people that maybe are at the top, maybe they're doing some of these things that he don't do. And what I would ask our community is, I don't spend time judging either approach. I just like that Omar himself respects and expects for him to be in that position based on what he personally is not willing to do. So I respect his approach. I would also like to see our community be able to respect the people that he says, the some black people on top, maybe they're doing some of these things that he's not doing, and based on their goals, I would like for us as a community to learn that both approaches are okay. Does that make sense? So it's like, while we're both saying don't necessarily get caught up in fighting into white spaces, if you choose to do it, play the game how you choose, play the game how necessary, right? And if you don't, get some of your own things, or like you said, move outside of those spaces and don't fight to do it. I'm really trying to weave through this thing to say, get better at all approaches are okay. I just want people to be aware of it and not get frustrated to the point where we don't try because we don't have the understanding that Omar Dean mentioned that he has at his own job. He accepts it because he don't play those type of games. Does that make sense? I know I'm saying a lot in there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, because I'm gonna tell you something. At my actual job, my director is racist, and it's in him. You know what I'm saying? And then something that somebody had said about Brian Flores. Am I saying his name right?
Yeah, you said it right.
Okay, this is what somebody was saying about Brian Flores. They was like, I was reading comments where people were like, if he why wasn't it racist while he was still working before they let him go? See, the people who made that comment don't understand the game. I work at a job. It's going to be very seldom that you work at a job where your manager is not a racist if it's a white person. It's going to be hard to find. So I work at a job and my manager, my director is a racist. He works somewhere and he knowing this whole time that, he got the position or whatever, but he understands it's racism tied into that. We can't escape that part. So what you do is you get in, you do what needs to be done or whatever the case may be. He made his millions and all that. So now I'm finna tax your ass. Now I'm finna circle back and tax your ass because I'm in a position to do that. And then a lot of people were saying, like mocking people that's working a 9 to 5 and was like, they ain't gonna step up and say anything. They'll be a damn fool to step up and say anything if they don't have a plan B right now. You know what I'm saying?
I love it.
So
love that thought, Queen.
Huh?
I know. I love what you just said. I love, yes.
Yeah, like to ask somebody to sacrifice for what? Like what benefit is they gonna have other than being unemployed or whatever? And then when they do that, they still gotta go to the racist ass government to get unemployment benefits. So you might as well be able to sustain your lifestyle until you can stand up. See, a lot of people are not patient enough to put themselves in a position to use the system. That's just like my manager. I know he's racist. So guess what? He gonna try to act like he ain't racist. So I'm finna learn everything I need to learn from him. I'm still gonna report your ass enough to I still reported him because I can't. I'm not gonna get fired for reporting him, but if I didn't report what he was doing, he could have used that as leverage to get me out the door. Now we see that now there's a paper trail. So now they're not gonna let me go because they scared of a discrimination suit. So now that keeps me that protects me in a position where I could keep my job. And then after that, you know what I'm saying, I could establish a paper trail in case I want to file a suit later on. I can establish a paper trail. Then on top of that, for him trying to prove that he ain't racist, he doing other stuff like promoting me and things like that or whatever the case may be. So I'm benefiting off of his racism because I'm not emotionally attached and I understand it's a game that's being played and I'm just going to play the game. So right now, I actually benefit off his racism. And then too, if push come to shove come to a push, I could turn around and flip it and I could still sue their ass because I got a paper trail. You get what I'm saying? So somebody will be like, well, why you won't quit? Because he's racist. Why would I quit? Because he's racist. I'm still getting my check all the time. I don't like his ass either. You get what I'm saying? He don't like me and I don't like him, but we gotta work together. I don't care that he's racist for real, but I'm not gonna allow your racism to fire me. I'm gonna do the proper paperwork or whatever the case may be because I done been through that before. But all at the same time, people have to strategize and learn how to maneuver out here because it's a cold game. And if you going in with emotions or you looking at one person's circumstances and say how they should handle it versus another person who ain't even in it, then you talking out the side of your neck because you don't even know the inner workings of what level of racism that they're dealing with. You know what I'm saying? It could be something, somebody could be micromanaging you. That could be a form of racism. It could be something they not promoting you. It's all different levels. So you got to be careful with just trying to put out these blanket statements because the levels that people are dealing with, sometimes it puts them in a position like me. What was happening to me, I could report something. It could have been something else that it would have just been my word of mouth and it wouldn't have been valid and I would have looked stupid and I would have looked like I'm creating a hostile environment and they would have got rid of my ass anyway. So it just depends on what that person is experiencing. So we just got to be careful with putting out those blanket statements on it should go this way in every scenario.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was hoping and that's what I was trying to do at the beginning of this discussion. That I wanted to say the higher discussion I wanted to have. Let me mute you because you hear some background noise.
Oh, that's my windshield wipers.
Okay, no problem. I muted you for a second. But that's what I wanted to highlight. We're not going to keep this one going too long, but I wanted to highlight in the beginning that I tried to make very clear that I wasn't necessarily having a dialogue about what I personally think Brian Flores should be doing. I actually respect that the brother is doing something within his industry that he just says, hey, I'm making this bigger than me, because if it was just about him having a job, he could go easily do that. He wants to do something bigger, so much respect to him. But I agree with what DeAsia is saying. At the end of the day, I just think when we understand the game, you can choose to play, but just know that our ancestors have set it up to where we do not have to fight to be in white spaces. So know that going in and figure out your game plan if you are faced with these things while, in a sense, in a job or in some type of position where you have to do that for a while. So just understand our ancestors have given us that benefit, and I think we should pay respects to that. And for those who are in those spaces, also learn to respect how they may maneuver versus us as Black people looking at them and name calling. I just really hate that, like Deasia said, you never know somebody's individual circumstances if you're not in their shoes. And quite often, even as the working class, we can look at somebody who has a lot of money and say, hey, they should do this and they should do that because we think they're okay because they have a lot of money. That decision is no different than why you may choose, unfortunately, sometimes to accept some BS at work that you might not really want to accept based on your life circumstances. So one, don't tell someone else how they should be. And again, that's what I hope I made clear. I wasn't doing that with Brian Flores. I just wanted to highlight deeper dialogue about being in a position that our ancestors have granted us to no longer fight to be in white spaces. Thank you, DH, for coming on. Yo, got a little wind still coming in the background, but if you have a last thought, I'll let you get it off real quick.
I'm in traffic. I'm just trying to get ahead of this little winter storm or whatever. Thank you for having me on.
I appreciate you, Queen. Hey, real quick, y'all, this Queen has her amazing show called Destiny of the Asia. She has it on here right now. So since I got you on, I always like for you to highlight your show. So, let them know anything you want to know before
Yeah. Yeah, I have a podcast called Deaths of the Asia that's on YouTube, and I stream live sometime on Facebook as well, where I have kind of pretty much turned it into a story time at this particular point, where I just talk about like just some really funny experiences that I've gone through, and then also I have another podcast along with a group of co-hosts that will be starting February the 7th. It's a hip hop podcast, and it's called Hip Hop School Past and Present. That's on YouTube as well, and Facebook also. So check those pages out and subscribe to those YouTube channels.
I love everything she's doing. Looking forward to the hip hop stuff. Thanks a lot for supporting me, Queen. Anybody out there listening, y'all could have jumped on just like she did. The link is available. We're about to close the show out. I'm gonna read a piece from my upcoming book called Just My 3 Cents: Necessary Conversations on Race, Sex, and Culture. All right. This piece is kind of relates to today's discussion, and this is how I end every show. This piece is called Black Socrates Speaks, American Football and the Dilemma of Exceptionalism. This is only an excerpt from the piece. This piece is a little too long to share for the end, so I'm just going to read an excerpt. The only choice or chance a little black or brown child has to succeed in America is to be exceptional. Many may ask, what's wrong with that? Well, after this country elected Barack Obama as its first black president, the concept of a post-racial society crept into the American lexicon. As if this one exceptional black man achieving the highest office in the land meant it was immediately time to explore if racism was nearest end in our country. Kwame Ture, a.k.a. Stokely Carmichael, always warned, do not confuse the success of a few with the success of the many. While I admit I was elated to witness the first black president of the United States in our country's history, I must also never forget Oscar Grant was shot and murdered by a white cop at Fruitvale Station on New Year's Eve, 2 weeks after Obama's inauguration. I also recall 2 weeks after Obama's second inauguration in 2013, 15-year-old Hadia Pennington lost her life in a senseless murder in the president's hometown of Chicago at the hands of a young black male. So for all of America's progress, the value of black life has not changed. Our children are dying, and the aftermath of Ferguson exposed just how hard it is to score a touchdown in America if you live in a black or brown community. In the case of Michael Brown, people around the world are supporting the black community, yet America stands divided. If we are completely honest with ourselves, whites don't necessarily have to be excellent to succeed in America. One of my best friends once went through 7 interviews before getting hired as a manager at a new company. I remember after his 5th interview, he called me slightly frustrated and slightly amused because he knew he was well qualified and was nailing the interviews. I applauded him for keeping his composure because some blacks may have folded at that point. It was clear to us that even with his impeccable resume and excellent interviews, the company just needed to be sure before hiring a 6'1", 220-pound, dark-skinned black man. Ask yourself, have you ever heard of anyone completing 7 interviews to obtain a job? I'll wait for your answer. In his previous job, he watched the good old boy system leapfrog people into management that lacked his knowledge or skill level. Their main asset was knowing the CEO since college. At the end of the day, my friend is one of the top guys in his industry, and after surviving a barrage of interviews, he jumped ship and got paid his exact asking price. Touchdown. All right, y'all. Just my 3 cents. Make it make sense. See y'all next week.